AJ Treleven. In 2023, Treleven was awarded the Emerging Leaders Award. He was promoted to Director of Operations in October 2020. Before assuming that role, he served as Sprague's Regional Manager for the Puget Sound after leading Sprague's Seattle and Salt Lake City branch offices. Sprague is a huge company.
So Sprague is a commercial only, 100% commercial business. That's not up for debate. And it's that idea that we could also just learn to be great owners rather than this like, well, what's in it for me? It's really not about that. It's about...
Welcome to the Bug Bucks podcast, a podcast designed to help you become a bug money millionaire. Today's episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 course designed to help you start and grow your pest control company. I'm your host, Eric Bassett, and I've got Allan with me, of course. How's it going, man?
Great, man. Great time to be alive. Dude. Excited for the holiday season and cooler weather. So,
oh yeah, dude. I'm not a fan of the cold. So the holiday cheer is like literally the only thing keeping me from being depressed all winter long because I'm not a cold weather guy.
Just to clarify, my cooler weather is like from 90 to 70. So
yes. Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day. I was complaining to Allan that it was cold outside, and Allan's like, yeah, it's like 70 something. And I'm like, dude, it was 21 degrees this morning. So unbelievable.
Sure.
Well, today we actually have an awesome guest that I know you guys are going to love. But before I bring them on, I just want to remind everybody listening, the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform like Apple, Google, Audible, or Spotify.
Yep. And
if you love the show, please leave us a rating and a review. One last reminder, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, go to Bug Bucks. That is BUGBUX. We've got over 3,600 other pest control owners in that group waiting to connect with you and share their thoughts. That's also the best way for you to share your feedback on our show and have your questions highlighted and discussed here on the podcast. So make sure you find us on Facebook and join the group. All right, guys. So without further ado, the guest we have today is AJ Treleven. And I know you guys have probably heard that name before. I am going to give you guys a little bit of background information about AJ here. So he was promoted to Director of Operations in October 2020. Before assuming that role, he served as Sprague's Regional Manager for the Puget Sound after leading Sprague's Seattle and Salt Lake City branch offices. Treleven joined the company in 2012 in a sales role, and he quickly assumed increasing responsibility as he took roles in branch management, district management, and most recently as Regional Manager of Western Washington, Utah, and Nevada. In 2023, Treleven was awarded the Emerging Leaders Award by the National Pest Management Association, or NPMA, as you guys know. This single recipient award recognizes a rising star who has made a significant contribution to the association and or the pest management profession while demonstrating leadership and continuing service. In addition, he serves on NPMA's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, or the IDEA Committee. In recent years, he served as a board of directors for the NPMA and was a vital member for multiple NPMA committees, including the Leadership Networking Community Council and the Professional Women in Pest Management Council. Treleven has a degree in operations and supply chain management from Gonzaga University, an MBA from Seattle University, and an associate certified entomologist designation. He's active in the community, and Treleven serves as president, Green Trike, an education and advocacy organization with the Children's Museum of Tacoma. He and his wife, Lauren, have 2 boys, Gavin and Vaughn. So, AJ, when I saw this intro, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, that's a lot of stuff, and there's no way I'm leaving any of it out because it's all awesome. So,
well, thank you very much. It's nice to, it's nice when you actually put it all together and think, oh, that is actually quite a bit of stuff. But
you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Well, that's crazy.
I mean, we don't really give awards out on this podcast, but you certainly just won the award for the longest intro, which, I agree with Eric. If, all of that was necessary, it's hard to cut any of that out, but welcome to the show, brother. We're glad to have you. It's clear that you have an established reputation, and I think more than anything, when we bring guests on and we decide what we're talking about, we want to make sure that our listener, which is a pest control owner trying to up, his or her pest control business game, we want to make sure that the focus is on them, and this episode will be no different.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, looking at your business acumen, your experience here, I mean, Sprague is a huge company, big impact value-wise for both the consumers, pest control services, and other pest control professionals, right? I feel like you guys have really set the tone for a lot of certain business standards and practices within the business and the industry. So, I've got so many questions, and I'm having a tough time even figuring out where to start. So, here in the bio, it talks about you starting with the company in 2012. But this is a family-based business, right?
Yes. So I'm fourth generation. So great grandpa bought a single man operator during the Great Depression here in Tacoma. He was working at a meat packing facility that was serviced by a gentleman named W.B. Sprague, and Mr. Sprague couldn't afford to keep the business going during the Depression, and great grandpa just so happened to live next door to a banker, and managed to convince him to still bankroll him to buy the one truck and the equipment on the back of it. Turned around, sold his previous employer the meat packing facility, and it's been kind of on from there. So yeah, it's fourth generation. I mean, it operated out of my great grandpa's garage about 2 blocks from where I live right now for his whole generation. Grandpa ran it out of their house, with grandma answering the phones in the kitchen and dispatching the trucks using CB radios until they finally convinced them to get an office about when my dad and my uncle were joining. And then that's really where it moved from kind of operating out of the house, maybe a few family members, an uncle, a cousin, all these people were all kind of related in the business, and then figuring out, how we scale from there. And that's really where it kind of moved from into that kind of scaling mode as, I think when my Uncle Larry, who's been here now for, I believe it's 52 years, when he first started, I think his first year, our revenues were about $600,000 a year as a business. And so we've really seen that huge jump. So while we're fourth generation, we kind of have also had that experience of going second generation in the scaling model and really seeing both sides of that.
So I want to know what truck that was.
Yeah.
What was the truck?
I can't remember if it was a Model A or a Model T. So essentially, W.B. Sprague started the business in Spokane, Washington with a partner, but they wanted to expand across the state. And so he moved to Tacoma, where the port was. And then they decided to just split the business because they were trying to communicate via telegraph to run everything. So this is back in 1926. And kind of a fun story, though, 2 generations later, we ended up actually acquiring that business that was the first other half of Sprague over in Spokane, and kind of brought it all back together.
Wow. Yeah. So you guys went, when you're talking about getting that point, that $600,000 mark until now. I mean, I wish I could look at just a growth map of your guys' company and take a peek and watch it just astronomically climb.
But $600,000 50 years ago, that's not
decent.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No, it definitely wasn't. But if you look at kind of even 10, 15 years ago, going from kind of that like 10 to 12 million range up into, getting into that 50-ish range, that's kind of been the astronomical growth for us over the last, really only 10 to maybe 15 years.
When you got north of 10 million, what were the hurdles after that? As we've grown our pest control company, I know at different stages there are different hurdles. What are some things that stick out as, different pain points?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a couple of them. One of them kind of from the business side is those pain points of entering new markets. Like, so once you get, getting to a certain size, we started having customers that wanted us in other places, right? Like, can you please come here? Or even those ultimatums of either you come here or we're going to have to move all the business elsewhere because we want it under one supplier. So learning how to enter entire new states just kind of with one customer and then build out everything around it was definitely a challenge. Understanding how we spread geographically, and with that kind of this there's kind of this moment where it shifted from every year we used to have a barbecue with the whole company at Larry's house, right? On the deck, everyone. And there was kind of this year where we realized that's not possible. Like that will never happen. We didn't even know when we had the last one, we didn't know it was the last one kind of thing, right? And those cultural shifts that change from the way we look at it, and we think of it in a family business, like the family, it's just like the life cycle of a family, right? So you have a matriarch, a patriarch, kind of this core nuclear family, right? And you go through a couple different cycles. One is as generations get older, the business goes from being your baby to your grandchild, right? And your roles change, and you have to give space, and we have to steward the seeds, but then also give space for the next generation. And then from a broader standpoint, changing this mindset around, we had kind of our cluster in the northwest of offices. We were there like every month, very tied in. And this kind of dispersion of as the family gets bigger, the offices are all nuclear families and they're all cousins now. But it's not one tight nuclear family. It's a whole bunch of, the Utah branch is a nuclear family and they're cousins with everyone else. So we have this shared culture, but also unique culture. To that, kind of nuclear area of what they're experiencing. And so bridging over that gap was really challenging, especially, we have tons and tons of tenured employees and, 20 plus year employees who remember it one way. And then as it's grown and morphed, trying to make sure that we honor tradition and honor who we are at our core and still leave space to have every individual branch be who they are within that umbrella.
Comparing the business to that small nuclear family, right? And then having to make that transition is something that I think is so interesting, because we talk a lot with business owners about being able to delegate and to give opportunities to their management team and to really kind of give them space to work, right? And the way that you said it makes so much sense to me. When you have, it's like, for me, my wife and I just had a baby, and we've got, all these family members that are, wanting to spend time with us, right? And if anybody's listening has kind of ever been in that space, at some point you're like, dude, I just need my space with my little family. You got to let us grow, do our thing, right? Otherwise, you just kind of suffocate people that way. And it's the same kind of dynamic in business. If you hand something over to a manager and you say, hey, this is yours, you take ownership over this. And then you just kind of sit there and be the helicopter parent, right? You're not doing them any favors, and most likely you're kind of cutting out their legs out from under them, because as soon as they make a mistake, instead of them fixing it and learning from their mistakes, you're there to be like, oh man, I know I shouldn't have given this to you. Let me take it back from you. Right. And, it's just such an interesting way to kind of compare it to something that I think people really get and they really understand.
Yeah, from a business standpoint, we call that our centralized strategy, decentralized decision making. But from a story standpoint, it makes a lot more sense when we talk about it about families, right? Because everyone's got the crazy cousins in a different state, and they're still family, and you'll still show up and support the hell out of them and take care of them. And they're not exactly the same as you. And that's okay, because that variety is important and amazing.
Yeah.
So
and
how do you decide like what is, protocols and processes that you don't change? Like, hey, this is part of our brand. This is part of who we are and what people have come to love about us and what our personnel have come to love about us, and the things that they can have some leeway with. How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to that idea of centralized strategy, right? So Sprague is a commercial only, 100% commercial business. That's not up for debate. So someone can't be like, you know what, we're going to start doing houses here. It doesn't work that way. We actually have independent QA auditors, like they report separately in the business, that are out checking the work to make sure that it's meeting all of our quality standards. So we have full-time people that are out driving around, checking in with customers, making sure they're audit ready, they're meeting our standards, they're meeting third-party auditor standards, and then actually collating that data for training, right? To make sure that, like, if we're seeing a consistent trend on missing a certain thing in compliance, then we're then training out to the whole organization to make sure we, overcome that issue. And so we kind of have our protocol standards, we have our mission, our vision, kind of our principles that we talk about, and then our strategy around commercial only, own the West, and build in this footprint that has so much when we're talking the Western 10 United States, there's so much land, like there's just so much ground to cover. And so, we have to, but we also have to give that leeway to say like, hey, if in this area, it's mainly agriculture, grain, apple, potato, whatever, that's a very different world than if you're the downtown LA branch, right? Like, and our Seattle branch only covers 80 square miles, yet, we have a branch in Utah that covers the entire state. They just generally have different experiences, whether it's how much they see each other, how often they meet, the way they communicate, the types of pests, the types of accounts, all of those things are unique. And we think that's great. And that is better to have experts in the area that know what they're doing. And then also with that, we embed, we have kind of corporate level resources all over our footprint. We have regional entomologists, strategic account managers, all of these kind of people that are going out doing these trainings, checks, following the science, running tests, doing research, all of that are embedded in the branches so that they're kind of our go-between.
And when you were saying that you've got these third-party auditors, right? Mm-hmm. Guys that are ensuring that you have everything you need to for compliance reasons. When you say third party, you mean like you have like a specific department within Sprague that handles some of these audits, or you mean like a literal third party?
So what I mean, yes, great question. What I mean is there's Sprague employees that are quality assurance auditors. That is their full-time job. And man, hats off to them because they are on the road constantly. But so when I mean third parties, they're going out and checking, all of our accounts, but especially our accounts that are audited by AIB, BRC, SQF, all of these that have to pass their audits to exist, FDA, USDA. They're going out and ensuring that everything meets the standards. They our standards are actually slightly more strict than the most strict third party, and we just hold everyone to that same standard because it's easier to have one rule. And so they are Sprague employees, but they don't report through operations. They don't, we can't say, hey, can you pick up some work? They're not tied to the local branches, so they're kind of independent, and their only job is to go out and make sure the customer would pass an audit at any given day if someone randomly walks in.
It's awesome thinking that you guys have almost this independent operating department within your business that's sole purpose is about evaluating the work that gets done. Right. I mean, yeah. There's a lot of times when like I'll take a service manager and I'll say, hey, like I want you to go do ride-alongs with these, team leaders, or I want you to do ride-alongs with this particular employee and just kind of evaluate, see how they're doing. Right. But worst case scenario, if something else comes up that takes precedent over that evaluation, that ride-along, well, I've got to pull that guy off of that and have him do what's most important. You guys having a separate department, there's no other priority for them. That is the priority, so aside from anything else that's going on in the business, they are going to be able to get that job done and execute on those audits regardless. And so the quality control methods that you guys have must be outrageously consistent in the best way.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're actually going out and calibrating with each other, comparing audits, and then they'll go out and score the same place. Each of them will go out and score the same place to make sure they're calibrated and understanding. And then they're helping to stay up to date on all of our audit standards for third parties to understand what's changing, if there's new rules out, how we're going to adapt for them, and then how we're going to build the trainings, which then goes back to our technical team to build out the trainings to make sure we're meeting that. But it does, to your point, it prioritizes that to say, we're not going to ask you to do anything else. This is the job. And we think that is a huge value signal for the company, both internally and externally, to say, we're putting a lot of money behind this, and it's all for checking. It's all for verifying that we're delivering the promise that we sold. Because when we're selling pest control, it is 100% a promise. Like, sure, there's some equipment, but all we're saying is we are guaranteeing you're not going to have this problem. And it's very hard if you're not checking, to prove that. to say, hey, look, there isn't a problem, and here's the direct correlation to the work and not having that issue.
So how much of that,
and I think it's
where it's like, hey, if they think they have a problem, then it doesn't matter if they actually do, then there is a problem that you need to solve. How much of that is involved? On the residential side, it's everything. I don't care if they have a problem or not. If they think they do, they do. And that's how we treat our customers, because peace of mind is what we're, providing. So how much of that goes into what the follow-up would look like?
Oh man, it can vary so widely depending on your type of business, the vertical that you're working in. Our two main vertical markets that we work in is kind of anything in the food production side, whether that's immediately out of the field through the production, the distribution, the grocery, through that side of it. And then healthcare, a lot of hospitals, medical offices, that kind of work. And, in both of those, perception's a big deal because of brand. I mean, same with restaurants. You can really kind of go down the line. It can be a perception issue. At the same time, we're dealing with professional buyers, so our contacts are often people that are at least tangentially familiar with pest control and the general pests that they're needing to be worried about. The risks are also a lot higher. So you fail an audit or the USDA shuts down the plant for a day, we're talking millions of dollars in lost production, right? So it's a very different value prop with, I would say on average, a slightly more educated buyer in terms of understanding at least the emergency levels of what they're seeing and what's normal, what's not, because we are sitting down and reviewing data for 12 months or a trailing 12 or 24 or seasonal fluctuations and all this kind of stuff. So there's that. But at the same time, if they have a problem, it's a problem and you need to be here. Like, you better be driving here right now, because if this doesn't get fixed, we have massive chain reactions of problems. I mean, we see, product recalls and all of this kind of stuff that you read about in the news. And, number one way, or not the number one, but one of the big ways listeria enters these food plants is actually through bird droppings and then people tracking it on their feet, right? So the bird defecates outside, they walk through it, they walk into the plant without using the shoe wash, and now you've introduced listeria to the plant. And so pest birds on the outside can be a huge deal. And if you're not paying attention to it, it becomes, nightly news.
So there's some scenarios where it's like, hey, we have this ongoing issue, and you guys are like, no, you don't.
I mean, it can be. That's where the data sets us free, right? Like, and we really focus in on that idea that every technician is a scientist. Every day, what we're doing is we're making hypotheses and we're testing them. Right.
Wow.
So, hey, I think there's an issue with stored product pests on this product in your warehouse. Okay, well, let's place the pheromone traps. Let's look at the different options we have. Let's inspect for spillage, and then let's collect data and either prove or disprove this hypothesis, and then make actions according to that. And we do have the benefit where a very large majority of our customers are either weekly or twice a month. So we have this repeated experience of going back and back and back and collecting all of this data. But, when you look at a lot of these accounts that are hundreds to thousands of devices, that data aggregation and kind of analysis becomes a much bigger part of the program.
Given the weight that you guys have with what's at risk here, if something happens, what kind of relationship do you guys have with these bigger overarching compliance organizations? You guys have normal conversations with them? Are you on like hey, I can pick up the phone and contact anybody there and just kind of get their input on it? Or is it kind of like you don't talk to them, they don't talk to you, so you can ensure there's...
No, yeah. They're great in terms of asking questions. We've run things by them before. When remote sensing started to come out, we're talking with AIB and saying, hey, how is this going to change in your standards? Because they don't account for it right now because it's brand new technology. And so we have people on our technical team that are tied in with them, kind of our some of our long-standing people that have been in the industry for decades that know. heck, I know of at least one of our previous quality auditors who retired is now part-time auditing for one of those entities. So yeah, we have those relationships. I would say they can always be stronger, but we are able to find answers when we need to, or discuss, hey, I don't know if this is exactly how it is interpreted. Can you clarify for me?
Yeah, I know that, I've talked to Allan about this before in the past. We've talked about like vendor relationships, right? Yep. Relationships with vendors. And one of the vendors we talked about isn't really a vendor, but it's the Department of Agriculture who kind of does our inspections. It's who we answer to if something goes wrong, right? In my mind, if I've got somebody who has the power to, audit my work and shut me down and has that kind of authority, I'm going to try to make sure that they're my best friend. Like, whatever you think I need to do, man, I'll do it. Right. We'll make sure that happens. So it's, but I've never had to deal with the kind of, the weight that you guys are, right? Just like you said, somebody shuts down an operation for a day or two, millions of dollars worth of, lost opportunity here. We're talking about, we get a wrong phone call or we misapply a product in someone's house and, fine an angry customer. Right. So,
yeah, it's all relative though, right? Again, part of what we love is that kind of professional buyer. It's not their house. You'd be surprised that actually in a lot of ways, sometimes the emotions are more business-like than they are when misapplying a product at someone's house. Or, I remember from the old days, before I worked here, but, stories of like when you go and treat the wrong house and that person wants you to, whatever, remove all the dirt from their property and give them new dirt. Yeah, right. So, yes and no. The financial implications can be really large. And at the same time, sometimes it's a little less. It's not their house, right? It's a place they work. Look, we take it very seriously. We're really proud of when we look at just in a single day how much we protect from a food and kind of workplace standpoint. It's easily can extrapolate to millions of people. When you've got grain elevators, how many loaves of bread? Where's that going? Apples, potatoes, onions, oranges. You go through the list, and we take it very seriously, and we take what we do very seriously, but at the same time, we don't take ourselves very seriously. And that's kind of back to that family business aspect. Like, if we're not teasing each other, we're not loving each other.
So what are some of the concerns, some of the issues that come up with family business?
Oh, are there any? Unaware.
First of all, you're preaching to the choir. Although we had startups, so it's different than for generations. Certainly, I can imagine what that would be like. But what is, because you're experiencing it at a different level. Yours are, because we own our companies, we started them, and so that's different in my mind. That's different than Grandpa did things this way. I would be a little more nervous to change things.
I am very impressed, amazed at the way that every generation has learned how to do it better when we talk about generational transfer. And I want to give massive kudos to my dad, Alfie, and my uncle, Larry, who sought out other companies, not in the industry, but even just elsewhere in the business landscape that have these multi-generational families, and said, like, how do we get the resources? How do we make a plan? How do we do this in a way that doesn't put pressure? Like, none of us were expected to go into the business. It was our choice if we ever wanted to. And if none of us did, that's fine. And if all of us did, that's also fine. However, we had rules. Like, you had to be hired just like anyone else, given the skill sets that you currently had. I was up against other people for promotions, didn't always get them. Like, it wasn't, and
you do kind of get a leg up, though. You do kind of get a leg up.
There's a lot of that historical knowledge. But at the same time, what I would say is, I think one of the most important things that we've built in is, up until very late in my, more recently in my career, we never had family report to family, right? So I always reported to a non-family manager in whatever role I was in. But going back to that family business side, like we've been meeting as a family, having family meetings for the entire kind of ownership group or the people in our two families. There's 3 on my side, 3 on my cousin's side. So there's 6 of us in what we call G4. There's already 8 in G5. And we were all together in Hawaii for Pest World and had our family meeting on the back half of that. But we've been doing that for, gosh, almost 20 years now. And it's this idea of teaching us how to be great stewards, right? This is my seat for today. It's not who I am. It's not my seat for my life, right? Like I'm taking it and I'm stewarding it for now. And my cousin Paul, who's our director of sales, is stewarding that role for now. And Ross, who's our president, is stewarding it for now, right? And none of it is permanent. And it's that idea that we could also just learn to be great owners. So that was what, when we were younger, it was like, here's why it's important. Here's the impact on the families that work at Sprague and the impact on the world that our mission and vision have. And here's how you can steward that as an owner. Here's how to represent yourselves as owners and look at that as an opportunity to be tied together as a family rather than this like, well, what's in it for me? It's really not about that. It's about the stewardship and thinking generationally for how we build this into G5 and G6 and on and on.
Well, I think it takes a lot of different answer than I was expecting when I asked about family issues, and you're talking about having meetings after Pest World in Hawaii, and like, yeah, that's a definitely different experience than I have. But maybe that's part of the 4 or 5 generations of doing it. We're still trying to figure stuff out. You guys are, writing books about it and.
Well, every time we're already realizing stuff we missed when we started this process from G3 to G4, right? And really it's about that continual learning and thinking, okay, because we've had some of those knockdown, drag out discussions about like how this should look and
what are those like?
Transfer
how do those work?
I think back, because again, we had like one big family meeting a year, and I think back to one, I think I was in high school. It might have been early in college, but it was in Arizona, over like a President's Day weekend. And there was kind of this like, all of us are still in college or younger. So it's kind of this hypothetical world we're living in and trying to understand like, okay, how do we move forward in this? Like, is everyone an owner? Is it just people that work in the business? And kind of like doing a lot of this, we were invited in by our parents, which is amazing, to have these open discussions about like, here's an idea, and then look at what the reaction is. Like, how does that make you feel if you are or are not in, or how we do it this way and that way, and really invited all of us.
Does everybody get invited in?
Yeah, so what do you mean by everyone?
Just by virtue of being a family member, is there kind of this effort that, maybe you're not going to run the company, but there will be this opportunity for you to be part of us?
Yes. That everyone is in those conversations. And in our family meeting, 3 of the 6 of us are in the business, but all 6 of us plus our spouses, grandkids are there, everyone is, not our G5 is there. So it is as much about, it's not so much about the business, and we're trying to make this leap in our minds from a family-owned business to a family that owns businesses, right? So how do we do this together as kind of investors? And some of us operate one of the entities and others don't, but we're all a family together in this endeavor.
Man, I'm listening to the way that you describe the dynamic, and I can just tell that there's a lot of PCOs that are listening right now, and they're just dreaming that someday they'll have so many generations in their business that they have to use acronyms like G4, G5, right? Like, how many generations am I going to have in this business when I have to like shorten things up to like specify which generation I'm talking about here? How cool is that
though? Like in pest control, it's one of the only places I've ever seen that be like a thing where we have, like, I have tons of friends in this industry that I've grown up with, and it's like, oh, okay, they're generation 3, that's a 4th generation, oh geez, that's a 5th, there's a 3rd, and you just like can walk through the room I've worked outside the business. I've got lots of, friends from school and stuff that maybe have a family business. Their industries are nothing like this. And I think it's such a powerful testament to this industry that doesn't even seem wild. Like yes, it takes time because generations take time, but it's not outlandish for people to be like, I hope there's a fourth generation. Well, yeah, that's not that uncommon.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sitting here trying to think, AJ, of another company that has 5 generations that didn't go public, and I can't think of one. I know that there's a couple. I have a good friend, Erin, in Tennessee, and I think her grandfather started it.
Yep.
And so that's 3 generations. But, and I know our industry is kind of, I think, a little more susceptible to that. But don't understate what you guys have done. 5 generations, getting along with business partners, period, is difficult. Getting along with family is even more difficult. So hats off to you. I honestly cannot name, and maybe you can, AJ, another company that has 5 generations in pest control.
Well, I appreciate that. I will say, we have 5 generations, not all in pest control, right? Like the oldest of our G5 is 9 years old. But they're there, they exist. So we're coming. G4. Yeah, we'll see if they want to be. Again, it's not no pressure, but there's a number of those when you start to go through the Jenkins and the Rose, both Roses, the Macaulays. And I think it's partly the circle you surround yourself with. We sought out other family businesses to understand and to share ideas. Able, Arrow, on and on, Massey. So there's a lot of these multi-generational businesses.
Some of those have had significant exits, but yes.
Some have. And there are still a lot that are there. So, I mean, it's not to undersell us. It's to say that how cool is it that we have an industry where whenever I look at these exits, all I think about is like, okay, that just made a huge hole for the next one. We're like, who's next up? Who's that next person thinking? Not just about like this quarter or this month or this year, but how are people making decisions generationally? Like, how am I setting this up so that, yes, I will see success in my lifetime, and so will my children, and so will theirs, in a way that has meaning for also, especially for the people that entrust us with their livelihoods, all of our employees, the people that have multi-generations of their families working here. And how do we make sure that we set it up so that they don't have to worry about where that's going to go and if they have an uncertain future?
Love it.
Man, I feel like what's tough here is that we're running short on time. I feel like we're barely scratching the surface on some of the value that AJ could bring to the listeners that we have on this podcast. So we're definitely going to have you back on the show.
Would love it. Yeah.
Probably sometime soon. And I know that someone's going to just totally destroy me and be like, dude, Eric, how could you have AJ on the show and not ask him more questions about commercial services? Right? And commercial customers. And I know we don't have time. I know you guys are hoping for that. So I promise we'll have AJ back. We'll dig into some of the nitty gritty details.
Ask us some questions. Go to Bug Bucks, our Facebook group. Ask some specific questions. We'll make notes of those so that we have them the next go around, the next 6-8 months, something like that.
Yeah, because I love that stuff. I mean, again, I was a technician. I ran commercial routes in downtown Seattle, food plants, you name it. I love chasing roof rats. That's all the fun stuff that, unfortunately, as you get bigger and, we talk about this evolution of the businesses, there's a lot of stuff to happen that doesn't get to be that, but it's still the fun stuff and the science behind it. Again, like, how cool is it that we work in a place where like no 2 animals act the same, and we have to constantly tinker and come up with new ideas and try new things. And then if it doesn't work, that's just as exciting as if it does, because you learn something new.
Yeah. Dude, it's having you on the show. It's going to be probably a few different times because unpacking your experience. There's not a lot of guys that are in your position, your type of company. In fact, I'm going to say there's probably no guys in your position, in your company, with your specific experience and your ability to share that information. So, dude, thank you so much. It's been awesome. So for you guys listening, like Allan said, if you have questions for AJ specific about commercial accounts or really whatever, anything we've talked about today, post them in the group. Speaking of which, if you guys haven't joined that group yet, it must be crazy. Go find the group and join. It's Bug Bucks on Facebook. It's BUGBUX. AJ, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It has been awesome.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure. Had a ton of fun.
Awesome, dude. We're going to have to definitely have you guys on again. And for everybody listening, of course, this podcast episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 course for growing and scaling your pest control company. And until the next episode, you guys keep building your pest control companies. Thanks, guys.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.